EV sales are collapsing everywhere, and also the sky is falling. But is it? Is that really the case? I don't think it is. I'm Chicken Little. Welcome to my Tesla weekend. Joining me today is Herbert, my good friend Herbert, who joins me as he does sometimes, so he can make us all a little bit brighter. And I appreciate that, my friend. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Brian. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm at CES this week. I am doing the magic, getting all kinds of insights, and getting a ton of interviews, both on and off the record. I've talked to some people who design chips. I've talked to people who work in battery research labs, and some of them may even be willing to come on the channel at some point. But today, what we're going to be talking about is the sky is not falling. Now, I don't know if you saw this, Cox Automotive, a record 1.2 million EVs were sold in the US in 2023. 1.2 million. That's pretty big. That's 7.6% up from 5.9% the year before. Why is there the perception, do you think, that EV sales are down?
Well, we know why it is. You and I know what it is. But the perception from audience, because they keep hearing from all these mainstream media saying that EV sales demand has fallen, really it's because they're taking a look at the sales of the legacy automakers. Their demand is falling. They've tried to come out with some EV models, and few of them have gone past the 10, 20, 20,000 mark. Maybe the lucky ones are selling 200,000, but that's about it. It's a drop in the bucket. They're not succeeding. They're very unprofitable. And when that's actually going to show up, it's funny that idea that the EV demand is falling is already happening now, because just wait a quarter from now, because there's a lot of channels stuffing. Ford it was just revealed there that dealers were saying that's almost 50% of all the cars that they claimed that they sold are still sitting in the inventory lots, like in the dealer lots. So we're going to see, we haven't seen anything yet, but that's the story. That's what they're telling the story. And so even the legacy automakers are out there. The CFO of Ford, John Lawler, just came out saying exactly that the demand is falling, or the way he said it was this: yes, EV demand is actually growing, but it's lower than what we expected. And that's how we positioned it.
And that's fair. You and I have said this a million times, but it's not EVs they don't want. It's your
Yeah.
EVs they don't want. And for those who don't know what channel stuffing is, it is counted as a sale when the paperwork transfers from the manufacturer to the dealer. Now that's not a trick. That's not something that's new. That is standard accounting practice. It is no longer your property. It is the dealer's property. Now, there have been shenanigans in the past where there was a time when NASCAR actually used stock cars. And by stock, they mean a real car you can go out and buy, and we're going to race it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a limit, there was a minimum number that they had to sell in order for it to count as a stock car. And one year they came out with some radical concept car and just forced all the dealers to buy one. So they had enough out there. They never sold these cars. They ended up selling them back to the manufacturer. But apart from those, these are temporary things. And if you look at the vehicles that are being moved from the manufacturers to the dealers, we're still lower than we were pre-pandemic. I don't know about where you live or where everyone out there lives, but the dealer lots don't look as full as they did 5 years ago. They're still pretty sparse compared to what we've seen historically, but that can mask some of the EV sales. So, especially if they're sitting around disproportionately long. I know there was a post on X yesterday morning, I'm not sure, yesterday morning, where a gentleman was saying that he went to a very specific dealership because they had so many Lightnings sitting around, they were finally getting motivated to move them. So hopefully that translates a bit. So if it's not the legacy guys, who's selling this big increase in EVs in the US?
Well, I wonder who.
There's more to it. It's not just Tesla. They're not making up all of it.
Yeah.
Who else? Where's it coming from?
What do you mean? Yeah.
I mean, it's everybody. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
it's a little bit of
everybody
Volkswagen.
added up together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And considering we're still only talking about 7.6% of the market. It only takes, 2% from Hyundai and 2% from
Yeah.
Volkswagen to start offsetting the huge amount that Tesla has done. So it's still happening. Now, there's a little company out of Germany you may have heard of called Volkswagen. You may be familiar with them.
Mhm.
Uh, did you know that Tesla sold more EVs in the US than Volkswagen did of any kind of car?
Yeah, so in 2023, right, there was actually, I'm not sure if this is finalized because this is November numbers. Tesla has 4.2% of sales in the US at this point. And so this is the first time that Tesla actually surpassed Volkswagen sales. So, yeah, Volkswagen, an amazing brand, been around for decades. Then you've got Tesla, a small startup, and they're now selling more cars than one of the
For
largest,
it,
top three largest car makers out there.
and it's crazy. I wonder if any of that is a hangover from Dieselgate. I know a lot of environmentally conscientious buyers said after that, never again.
Mm.
But they do make good cars. They make reasonably compelling cars. They've got a wide variety of markets with something on offer. Um, but Tesla is now outselling them in the U.S. And if not, if December's numbers shifted the balance, if not, they're right there with them. They're very close. I wonder how much more of that we're going to see in the European market, which for the longest time was Volkswagen's home turf, and
Yeah.
now there's new entrants in the
The
market.
interesting thing about Europe that I've been learning is that the European auto market, these automakers, they sell to corporations and the fleets. They sell more to fleets than they do direct to consumer. And so that's just something to consider about, and the brand loyalty is very, very strong, right? And of course, Europe is trying to protect its German automakers, but the numbers are showing that they're declining. They certainly are no longer selling in China. That's one for sure. These European automakers are no longer selling in China, and they're declining in Europe. So it's just a matter of time. But Tesla's still the number one Model Y, still the number one vehicle in Europe as well.
The strategy Volkswagen has employed in China is a very lazy one. They partner with all these other
Yep.
companies
Yeah.
and just slap their label on a Chinese car to give it a little bit of cachet so it looks like an import even though it isn't. And I don't think Chinese buyers care if it's Chinese versus European. I don't think the European manufacturing is. There was a time when it was so much better than anything in China that
Yeah.
you'd rather have an imported car. But those days are more than 10 years ago. And I think the domestic market is happy to buy whatever. But I did see a funny headline. This is a little bit off topic, but it was about a week ago where it said GM sold this many cars if you include their partnerships in China. And those are not
That's not
GM
their cars.
cars.
Yeah.
That's not your car. I mean, that's like saying Elon and I own 20% of Tesla. It's true, but I mean, come on.
Yeah. So the
Uh,
the thing about Volkswagen, right? Didn't they just announce that they let go 30% of all of their staff, their employees? And Sandy Munro has been pretty vocal in the last several months here, saying that Volkswagen is in major trouble. They will be likely first to go down.
that is unfortunate and very surprising to me. I did have a chance to meet with Sandy briefly yesterday.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. It's about the, I don't know, millionth time I've met him, but it never gets old. Uh, and his crew is out here shooting stuff. Eric and the team, they're all great. They they really know what they're doing. But when it comes to automotive assessments, there are very few names out there that I trust more than Sandy. And when he says
Yeah.
Volkswagen's in trouble, see if somebody else had told me that, I'd say I don't think they are. But he gets to see behind the curtain in ways you and I don't.
Yeah.
And I've met a number of executives and engineers from benchmarking companies from Michigan, people who do exactly what Monroe and Associates does.
Yeah.
The difference is none of them want to go on camera. I mean, none of them. They'll tell you anything you want on background, but they won't go. I say, what if I could make you famous? definitely not interested. So it's unfortunate, but they're protecting their industry. So in coming years, let's look out just, let's say 3 years.
Yeah.
2024 is going to be real tough for a lot of the companies because they are not yet on the North American charging standard, and that is going to hold them back a little bit. I wouldn't want to buy a car if it didn't have NACS today. I imagine you feel the same, having had experience with the supercharger network and how well it just works. But let's look out 2 or 3 years. Who do you see in the US moving units of EVs in addition to Tesla?
That's a hard call. The problem is that when you hear these automakers, I guess the three big US legacy automakers, right? They've all made announcements that they're delaying their, their projections of when they're going to really kind of start getting back in EVs. The problem with that is that when you slow down, all the efforts you've made, you're cutting back in production lines, you have to cut back with supply chain. How do you come back from that, right? It's even that much harder when they do decide to come back. And when that happens, where would Tesla be by that point? You got to just kind of follow through. The Cybertruck will be in mass scale. That's going to compete with the truck SUV market in the US, right? Which is primarily large vehicles. Then you're going to have a low cost uh, Model 2 compact car out there. By then, you're going to have the revised Model Y. Um, 3 years from now, by then, maybe there might even be another, round of revisions. You never know. But because Tesla's always making updates every time that they can to the cars, they're going to continue to cut costs. That's the other thing to just keep watch out is margins, because as Tesla is able to scale more with the Giga Mexico now up on top of Giga Texas, on top of Fremont, you got three factories that are able to really scale in mass, just produce everything. It's all going to be robots. Is is there going to be the Tesla bot? Is a Tesla bot by 3 years significant? Could they have 5,000 robots working in Giga Mexico, like Tom Juice said at the investor day? He goes 10,000 employees, and what happens when we have 5,000 robots? That's what he said. The cost would just dramatically fall. So, I mean, like by 3 years, it's crazy to wonder what would happen to these legacy automakers. And if ICE cars continue to fall, which is their bread and butter, it's a typical, that whole thing where they're just legacy products and they're not going to be able to flip over. They will be weaker. So
There are carriage makers who were able to switch to making cars successfully for a time. The robots, now I'm going to push back on some comments that I get once in a while where they say Herbert is too optimistic and point out that 5,000 bots in the factory, that's crazy. That's optimistic. But those are not your words. Those are Tom Ju's words. So if we're saying that the executives at Tesla are too optimistic, I can appreciate that. But we're reporting what we know. And that is original source material right there. That is as good of information as we're going to get. So I would say what you're saying is right. These car companies have lost steam. They've run out of momentum. It's not that they don't
lost
want to sell
gas.
these cars. It's that the factories, they've run out of gas. It's that the factories they were building in which to build the factories, they've put the factories on hold. Without it, I mean, you got to have a factory to build a car. So growth is still coming. We're going to see more manufacturing in the US from all kinds of EV companies, both legacy and otherwise. Hyundai's got their plant coming up. Others are working on theirs. There will be Chinese factories in Mexico, it appears. Those will still qualify for the IRA credits as long as the batteries are made in North America, which I assume they would be. So the growth is going to continue. The story is not over. These adoption rates we're seeing in the US mirror the ones we've seen in other countries, and they are still going strong.
Yeah,
And as more people get butts in seats, it just works.
the number I've heard is that a car manufacturer needs to hit at least 200,000 units, vehicles per year in order to finally break through and be able to have manufacturing at scale to be able to do things profitably. So,
So I had heard it was 200,000 for the line before a refresh because there are a lot of models. Mercedes is a great example where they might not make 200,000 a year of a particular model because they have so many models. Uh, but the number is, it's not 10,000 and it's not 50. I mean, you need to actually get to volume or an assembly line just
Yeah.
doesn't make
So one
sense.
of the graphs that Cox Automotive pointed out was that in the next 2 years, 2024 and 2025, there's going to be 70 new electric vehicle models being introduced. And he shows all the brands that are being able to do this. The question you have to ask yourself is how many of them are just going to be 5,000, 10,000 units? They're just for, compliance reasons. And how many is actually going to get to the 20,000 to the 100,000, 200,000 units? That's what you need to ask. And that's the question because they're announcing these vehicles released in 2024, 25, but we know that they've cut production lines, they've cut factories, production. So uh, these 70, many of them are just going to die in the vine. They're just there for show.
Kia at CES announced a full lineup of different size vans, one of which can also be configured as a pickup, maybe more than one, but only one of them is actually scheduled for production in 2025. The others, until they happen, I just don't count them as real.
Exactly.
So awesome, exciting stuff. Herbert, I want to thank you for your time. Everybody else, what do we miss? What do we misunderstand? Like, subscribe, do the usual things, and stay tuned, stay juicy. And I cannot wait to hear from you, clever robots, when you're actually robots working in a factory building my car.